Good evening, everyone. We are going to just give the system a couple of minutes to pull everyone into the webinar, and then we'll get started. All right, good evening. My name is Kelly Wilson. I'm the Executive Director for Master's Admissions at the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm excited to be here with you this evening in Pittsburgh. I realize that you're tuning in from many parts of the world, and so I hope you either are about to have a good day or you've had a good day. I am excited to be here this evening with a group of our current MBA students who are club leaders and are participating in our first session of Tepper Talks. Tepper Talks is an opportunity for prospective students to get an insider's view into the Tepper School. The four-part series has four different components, or three different components. So 2 nights we'll have club leaders speak to the group. The third night we'll have the Career Center, and then the fourth night we'll have the Accelerate Leadership Center. The idea behind Tepper Talks is to give you some insight into how our students go about their job search. You may be surprised if you're at the earlier part of your research you may be surprised to learn that the clubs play a significant part in this process, and the leaders are excited to share that information with you tonight. What I'd like to ask you to do is, if you have questions as we go along, go ahead and type those questions into the question and answer box. We will hold all the questions until after the club leaders have made their presentations, so that you have the benefit of the content in its entirety. And then we'll do some questions. I'll moderate questions for the students to answer for you as we go toward the end of the session together. So at this point, I would like to turn the floor over to the students. And instead of having you each introduce yourselves up front, what I'd like to do is have us go through the process where the first speaker, Liz Hay, I'm excited to introduce you all to. Liz, if you can introduce yourself, just tell a little bit about where you came from in terms of your pre-MBA work, a little bit about yourself, and then maybe go into the presentation. And then each of you can be thinking about that as it's your turn to present. So at this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Liz, and she's going to tell you all about the work of the Consulting Club.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and welcome everyone. Very excited to have you all here today. Just before we start, Kelly, would you mind switching to kind of the TCC slides if we have that, please? Thank you. So just very quickly, a little bit about myself. So I am the president of the Tepper Consulting Club. Prior coming to Tepper, I spent 6 years working in financial services in New York City. First starting out at a financial research firm, building out an entire product division for North America, and then moving into asset management for 2 years. I came to Tepper particularly to be focused on business analytics, as well as a pivot into consulting. And I spent my summer at Carney in the Dallas office, focused on change management and digital implementation. So to talk a little bit about, the Tepper Consulting Club, or known as the TCC. Our goal is really to prepare you all to have a successful career in consulting. Our mission is to educate, mentor, and empower students and prepare them for a successful career throughout their entire professional lives, focused on consulting, whether that is external, kind of strategic management consulting, or even internal strategy careers. For us, we're very much dedicated to that interactive, customized, and inclusive programming. So we really want to focus on ensuring that you all have a smooth transition into the consulting world, building out that community really working to maximize your opportunity on the internship and full-time recruitment front by working closely with kind of our club through curriculum and internal events, but also with firms, alumni, and even the MCC. We do a lot of things too to really foster those relationships too with alumni. So we host numerous events throughout our time, throughout the entire minis, to really get you all connected to those alumni at these different firms, to help you understand, what each different firm provides, and to help you, again, maximize and grow that networking that is critical for the internship experience. In terms of our culture and club culture, we are very much oriented on supporting the community, supporting the first year, supporting the second years, building up kind of that hard work mentality that is vital in the consulting world. And then also really emphasizing the highest level of professionalism. So we are very much work on a collaborative process to ensure that you all, again, are successful, to ensure you have the most educated experience to really make sure that your opportunities throughout consulting are a success. And so for us, we really emphasize that at the TCC. Our community is also very diverse. And I think that is one of our greatest strengths. We have people who have very diverse backgrounds, pre-Tepper, and we have people who are very diverse in what they're doing in consulting, even throughout their summers. So we have an emphasis from healthcare to internal consulting to M&A activity to operations. Almost you name it, we've done it. So we are very much make that a big point in our programming and in our culture. Just some key benefits that I would like to highlight, from our perspective, it's really comes down to 4 things: education, career, networking, and mentorship. Things I think you've already heard me kind of mention before. But in terms of education, we have a very structured curriculum that takes you all through the process to ensure that your recruitment process is successful. So that starts out with behaviorals, and I'll show you all on the next slide, but behaviorals to then casing to networking, all in between. So we make sure that by the time interviews come around, you all are ready to go to get those internships or full-time experience. In terms of career, we want to make sure you know what's happening. So we want to make sure that you understand the industry, you understand the opportunities. And again, whether that's external or internal, we want to make sure that you all can make the most informed decisions. And networking, we have a very extensive network with alumni, but you'll get the chance to interact one-on-one with second years, your classmates, and professionals in the industry to really fully make those decisions. And then lastly, mentorship. We have a very extensive mentorship program that we do offer first years that is vital, I think, to your career development and really does make a difference, especially when you start going into the interview season. Kelly, if you wouldn't mind taking it to the next slide. Oh, thank you. And just so you all could kind of see what that process looks like, because I know it varies a lot from who you're talking to and what schools. So for us particularly, this is our programming, which we start you all off in September with those initial networking activities. You'll have numerous, corporate presentations, conferences, case comps, office hours, opportunities to start to educate yourselves on where you see yourself in the consulting career. That's also when we'll start on those behavioral interviews or behavioral interview practices and as networking practices. Towards October, November, we'll shift into more casing. That's also when we host our annual trek, which allows you to meet these firms one-on-one and get to really get that networking that you're looking for. And then finally in November and December, that's when we'll start that interview process where we're applying to the firms, getting ready to kind of start interviewing in January. And throughout that entire time, you will be working closely with a mentor to ensure that you all are meeting the goals that you have while you're at Tepper, but also the goals that you have for your careers in consulting. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it on to John, but thank you again for being here tonight.
Thanks, Liz. And thank you everyone for joining in. I'm John Briegel. I'm the president of the Graduate Finance Association. I spent this previous summer at Wells Fargo doing investment banking and technology, media, and telecom group based out of Charlotte. Prior to getting my MBA, I spent 5 years as an infantry officer in the Army. And so just a little bit about the Graduate Finance Association. So ultimately, we see it as we're serving two roles. Obviously, the most important role is preparing students to, for a career in finance, whether that's investment banking, corporate finance, asset management in conjunction with the Alpha Club. But secondly, we also believe that, just general finance knowledge is critical no matter what role that you're going to pursue in your future. And so we also offer a plethora of educational opportunities just to learn more about what's going on in finance, understanding, even for just your own personal investing reasons. And so ultimately, the GFA primarily serves students looking to get into investment banking or corporate finance. So for investment banking, the timeline's like pretty early on. You'll hit the ground running in September, get ready for some coffee chats in October, and then interviews in November. And so you start early, but you end early, which is a nice thing. And then corporate finance's timeline is a little more extended. You're doing interviews around November time, finding out where you're going to be going in around January or February. And so ultimately, the way that we get students prepared, first and foremost, we have a boot camp where we essentially lay out the timeline, the career options in finance. We start sort of setting our standards as the club and sort of what you're going to be doing. If you pursue the investment banking route, we have Banking Immersion Week where we invite 15 banks with our alumni, and you get to sort of have smaller sessions, understand bank culture, understand the differences between them and the true function of them before you start pursuing some coffee chats. We also host Wall Street Prep seminars, which is some really in-depth sessions, which ultimately, they're incredibly beneficial, I think, for just about anyone who attends them. So it's like former bankers, former corporate finance people who come in to teach us, which are usually very good. We also have the corporate finance trek, which is going to be in between minis 1 and 2. So we're getting ready for that actually right now. Which is an opportunity to go meet some companies, figure out, what opportunities there are out there for corporate finance. Throughout the process, as a member of the GFA, you'll be linked up with a mentor, and they'll sort of guide you, make sure, any sort of technical training that you need is on point, making sure that you have all the resources you need for a successful recruiting season. We also, obviously coming back to an MBA, networking is critical. And so we make sure that we have some, GFA mixers, get-togethers, make sure that we have provide ample opportunity for you to meet alumni through like alumni lunch and learns, through our speaker series. And then in terms of just technical prep, we host finance workshops, which are open to everyone. You don't just have to be pursuing finance. Anyone can go to those. And then, we do a lot of like behavioral prep for anyone going into corporate finance, as well as, again, just social events with like some golf events in conjunction with the golf club. So short and sweet, but, happy to field any questions during the Q&A portion. But other than that, I'll pass it over to Peter.
Great. Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Park, and I'm the president of the Healthcare Club. A little bit about myself. Prior to coming to Tepper, I spent 5 years in healthcare consulting with a company called ZS, based out of the San Diego office, worked with a lot of clients out in both the San Francisco and San Diego area. And this past summer, I spent my time at Genentech, working in the immunology space, working specifically on payer access strategy. So a little bit about the Healthcare Club. The Healthcare Club is the professional organization on campus for those students at Tepper that are looking to get into the healthcare industry. So whether that be leadership development programs, rotational programs at some of the bigger names like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Genentech, or that's healthcare consulting with companies like ZS, Simon & Kucher, LEK, or even health tech opportunities with a lot of startups that are out in the Bay Area. This is the club that's really going to help you as a first-year student navigate that ecosystem and find where you really fit. In terms of how we view ourselves and the healthcare ecosystem here at CMU, we view it across the entire spectrum. So before students come onto Tepper, folks like myself and the other members of the healthcare board come onto these types of webinars and also field questions from prospective students to give you an idea of what healthcare is like here at Tepper. During Tepper, we're really about helping you get your dream job within the healthcare industry. And the next slide I'll cover in terms of what the club offers. And then after Tepper, it's really about fostering this community of healthcare professionals within CMU and Tepper specifically. And Kelly, we can go into the next slide here. Yeah. The healthcare club, we really focus on these specific 5 pillars. And I'll start on the top left of the screen in terms of educational events. A lot of students that come into Tepper have a desire to break into the healthcare industry, but don't have specific background or context in terms of how the healthcare ecosystem works. So the club provides a lot of industry breakdown. So what's the difference between biotech and pharma? What's the difference between a payer versus a provider? All those nuances that make the US healthcare ecosystem complex, we break it down for members so that they get a better understanding prior to going into interviews in the second half of the year. Along with that, we bring in a lot of alumni that have gone through the industry who bring in a lot of knowledge, who can provide that perspective from an industry standpoint. The second item on the list in the middle is recruiting preparation. I think John and Liz have been mentioning a lot of that from a TCC and GFA standpoint, but you're coming to business school to land that dream job and get into that company or that industry you want. So we as a club want to make sure that whether that's in the LDP side, the consulting side, or even maybe healthcare investment banking, we want to make sure that you're well prepared in order to get that job and do well in those interviews. The third component is the healthcare career track. And this is something that's actually coming up in the next 3 weeks. Tepper has a mini cycle. So we've got about 13-week academic periods. And in between the first and second mini in the fall semester, we have a trek across all of our clubs on campus where we have the opportunity to bring companies on campus. So this year, from a healthcare perspective, we've got companies like Butterfly Network, Flatiron from a health tech perspective. We've got companies like Vertex and BMS from a farmer standpoint, coming in and giving students a perspective of what it's really like to work in those organizations and what the culture is really like. The fourth item on this list is mentorship programs. I think Liz mentioned that early on from a TCC standpoint. Mentoring and getting a mentor that's going to help you navigate recruitment or academics is really critical to your success in business school. So our club really puts a huge emphasis on pairing you with a second-year mentor that's going to help you navigate your time here at Tepper. And then lastly is exclusive C-suite roundtables. We're really excited this year to bring in Ed Harrington, who's the CFO at Genentech. He's going to be doing a roundtable discussion with us later this year. And then Deepak Ahuja, who's the CFO of Verily, which is the subsidiary of Google, will be coming and speaking with us. So it's really bringing industry leaders in who have been at Tepper, been in our shoes, and have climbed the ladder, been really successful at these large organizations, giving their perspective to students on how to be successful. With that being said, my contact information is down below. So if any of you on this call have any questions for me about healthcare at Tepper, feel free to reach out to me. And now I'll pass it off to Rob to talk about the GEC.
Thanks, Pete. I guess I'll get started by saying in typical entrepreneurial fashion, we broke the rules and didn't go with our Tepper Talks model here, but I guess I'll dive in nonetheless. Sorry about that. In general, my name's Rob Miller. I'm the president of the Graduate Entrepreneurship Club. Super excited to be talking to all of you. One of the exciting things I think about having all of the clubs in the room and something a little bit different about the GEC is that, the way we approach a professional career in startups or venture capital or, founding your own business is we understand that that's a different life cycle for a lot of students, right? That's not always something you immediately go to an MBA to pursue the moment you graduate, right? A lot of folks have different career aspirations, and entrepreneurship kind of comes into their life at different times. For me, myself, I'm going to be, moving towards startups. I've worked in startups before the MBA program. I'm going to be aiming to work in startups after that. But we have a lot of people and folks that you see right here on this board for the GEC that worked this past summer in finance, worked in consulting, at some of the biggest firms in the country. So we kind of span a lot of different interests. As a professional club, though, we try to do a lot of collaboration with the other clubs. So, for example, we get a lot of interesting reach outs from the entrepreneurial angle. Actually, Kelly, would you mind going to the next slide? I think it'll be more pertinent here. So just tapping into some of the things like speakers, mentors, as I was saying, we get some interesting reach outs. So today I got a chance to sit with the ex-CFO of product at PayPal. And so we're looking at actually doing a fintech kind of speaker series with him as he goes to launch his new fintech startup. So John, you're probably going to get an email from me tomorrow looking to do maybe a GFA GEC collaborative event on that. So, and on that note, last year, John and I did a great, collaborative event on SPACs, which went extremely well. We had some of the, foremost thought leaders in that industry come in and chat with us. So, the idea behind the GEC here is really just to create kind of a communal place where folks with a lot of different interests, whether that be fintech, healthcare, space with David down here, finance, whatever that is, to kind of come into a space and collaborate, just talk about the skills it takes to launch businesses, what's the latest that's happening in venture funding, how do we actually get businesses funded, when's the right time for me to actually go build my own startup. So some of the value that you see here come from the speakers, the mentors, the brainstorming opportunities that we create, and as well as that peer network that's unbelievably beneficial when you're trying to navigate something as tumultuous as entrepreneurship. Looking a little bit closer at speakers, because I think that can kind of be a big deal in the startup space to get access to some of the foremost thought leaders. We go anywhere from some of the biggest names in the world. Last year, we had the opportunity to bring in Mark Cuban to do a fireside chat with us, which was super exciting, all the way down to local businesses. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship through acquisition and you want to kind of go that route, through private equity funding to acquire small businesses, we'll bring in mom and pop shops to understand, how they operate and how they run. So we really try to kind of, work with the gambit of, professionals out there to bring people in and give you as much value as we can. Specifically with mentors, that's an extremely, important part of the entrepreneurial journey is understanding when you need to act on an idea, when you need to wait, when you need to move on. So we have our group of entrepreneurs and residents here at Carnegie Mellon and at Tepper specifically that are, operate out of the Swartz Center, which I'm sitting in right now, which is, an opportunity to work with seasoned professionals who have exited businesses, been part of acquisitions, our current venture capitalists to kind of, push you along in your journey. And then brainstorming and peers, that's just a big part of, kind of keeping that collaborative state alive. Kelly, could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. Competitions are a big part of what we do. So these are some of the premier competitions that we have. We run a competition called Hack a Startup, which is a 48-hour long hackathon where you put together a team of hackers, hustlers, and designers, we call it. So it spans the entire campus. You get introduced to software engineers, roboticists, people in analytics, and MBAs get to go in and pitch their ideas for startups and you compete for real cash prizes, which is exciting. We run the venture capital investment competition. Pete and I actually worked a little bit on that last year. We came in second place at regionals, only to Northwestern, so we got to go back and beat them next year. But great opportunity to get some ideas in front of venture capital firms and actually get critiqued by people out there doing it in the real way. We do a lot of different workshops. I actually just left a workshop before this that we had our first startup stories tonight. We brought in a gentleman named Grant Vandenbush, who is the chief category officer at Fifth Season, which is actually the startup I worked at before I came to Tepper. They just recently were able to, closed a total amount of funding of $75 million. He came in and he just talked about, tips and tricks as to how do you navigate taking something from an idea in your mind to going out and raising, millions upon millions and putting that into work. And then ultimately the treks, things have been a little bit difficult with COVID, but we're working around that. We have a lot of opportunities to activate in a place like Pittsburgh, which is a super exciting city to be in right now, especially with companies like Duolingo that just IPO'd. Those are Carnegie Mellon alumni. So we work with, folks from small businesses all the way up to folks that have just IPO'd to kind of get in on the ground floor and see what they're really working on. So just in general, we try to offer as much space to collaborate, to innovate as we possibly can. We give you the tools to get engaged with venture capital firms. There's opportunities to, do things called a student in residence position, where you're going to have an opportunity to work on projects for VCs, startups, anyone in that CMU alumni network that needs help in the entrepreneurial space. We're going to be the place that can really go and connect you to careers in that area. So yeah, here's my email, and if anyone needs anything, please reach out. But I'll pass it on to David.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm David Farron. I'm the president of the Stars Club. And before Tepper, similar to John, I spent 5 years in the U.S. Army and then 2 years at Walmart working in supply chain there prior to coming to school. So I have no background in space, but I'm president of the Space Club. So how does that work? Why does Tepper even have a space club? This is so out there and bizarre. And I didn't even know about this when I first came to school, and now I'm running the whole thing. So let me tell you a little bit about that. And first off, all of our clubs, as you can tell, have acronyms, and we probably have the longest. So I've written it out here for you. Students at Tepper for Astronautics, Rockets, and Space. But basically, we are the school's space club, looking at the new space age industry that has popped up in the last decade or so, and really trying to educate MBAs and get us into a position where we are leading the new space age that's happening right now. So how does all this work? Space is really exciting. If you've watched any news at all recently, like the billionaires are going to space. There was a Tepper MBA behind the sail for Jeff Bezos's flight this summer. He dealt with the auction himself. That was a Tepper MBA that used to be one of the leaders of this club. So we have alumni that are actually working there, doing really cool stuff behind the scenes. And but at the same time, it's pretty small, but it's growing really fast. And that's where we see a point. So unlike a lot of the other clubs, there's a lot of education for this. And this is a very industry specific club. So you can go to John or to Peter or to Liz and get a background in each of those functions, but you could do finance work in a space company. You could do healthcare work in a space company. And then a lot of the space companies are very startup focused right now, very entrepreneurial. So there's a lot of partnership that I do with Rob in this program. So it's a super exciting time. But a lot of it is the space companies don't even know about us. We are one of only 3 or 4 MBA clubs that exist in this industry across the world, as far as I can tell, which means we get a lot of visibility when people find out about us, but at the same time, they need to know we're here and we're available. So a lot of my job is reaching out to these companies and telling them, hey, we're here, we're ready for you when you're at the point in your business that you want to have business people running what you do. But a lot of it is educating students on what's out there, how to partner with the different organizations, and how to find your foot in that door. So a lot of it is very network intensive. So we don't have a lot of formal mentorship in this club, but there's a lot of go out there and partner with other organizations and get really tied into the industry itself and find your way from there. So I want to highlight the partnerships first and foremost. One of the really cool things with this club is we are not just a Tepper club. We do have students from across the campus that are involved with us, very similar to the GEC as well. They do that too, bring in students from different backgrounds and different perspectives. But we also actively collaborate with MIT's Space Club and other space clubs that are out there in order to bring the most high caliber speakers. So we've had top leaders from SpaceX, Blue Origin, And some of the other smaller companies, we've been able to have CEOs of some of these smaller startups, such as Astra, come and talk to us in the past. Yeah. Additionally, the events with this club are really cool. So we host an annual Space Innovation Challenge, which is a traditional MBA case competition, but it flips it on the head, and very similar to a lot of the GEC case competitions. You're starting up your own space company in this case competition and pitching it to the leaders in the space industry. So we're really excited about that. Have you ever been able to talk to an astronaut in a small group setting? Well, we just had that last week, and it was really cool. So we did a lunch with an astronaut. We are lucky to have one of them as a professor here on campus, but we've been able to bring in a few different speakers. One of my VPs he was testing out his product idea for space, and through the connections in this club, he was able to get in touch with 5 different astronauts in about 2 different days. So that was pretty awesome. So there's a lot of opportunities with this club to be able to pick the brains of the leaders behind SpaceX, Blue Origin, and more, and really get involved with this exciting industry. So we're out here. I know most of you are not on this call thinking about space, but even if you don't think about joining a space company coming out of Tepper, just keep your eye out for it, and you never know what'll hit you. Before you know it, you could be working in space. And with that, I'll pass it back to Kelly.
Excellent. Thank you so much, you guys. I'm going to back up to the first slide just so the group can see your photos and remember kind of what you talked about. What I'd like to do before turning to the questions that folks have submitted, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of you, if you don't mind. One thing strikes me as leaders of these clubs, I suspect it keeps you pretty darn busy. And I know that you've got boards for the clubs, and I'm wondering if maybe Peter, we could start with you, and could you just describe it? I may just call on a couple of you to do that to answer this question, because I think it's probably quite similar across the clubs. But could you talk a little bit about the structure of the club? So there's you and board members. How much time do you spend? And then there is a question from the group, just how many clubs are you personally involved in? It seems to me like one club could take up all of your time, but I already know that you're probably involved with more than one. But Peter, would you mind just to talk a little bit about the structure of your club and what other clubs you're involved in?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question, Kelly. In terms of the structure of the club, I think most of the clubs are structured in this manner. And I think Rob's slide laid it out nicely, but you have a president and an EVP who are really the leaders of the club. And then you have supporting members that are also board members. And for the healthcare club, we've got 4 specific board members, and then that makes us a total of 6 who have their own roles and responsibilities within the club. So you'll typically have like a VP of education, a VP of recruitment, a VP of alumni relations, and their specific roles tend to gear towards a specific area they're interested in. In terms of the time commitment, the nice thing about leading a club is it's really how much time you want to put into it. So for me specifically, I have a strong interest in healthcare and really growing the healthcare ecosystem here at Tepper. So some weeks it could be maybe 8 hours a week, or some weeks it can be 2 hours a week, right? So it really depends on how busy you are and how much effort you want to put into really making the club what it is today. And I think in terms of that last question you asked, Kelly, in terms of how many clubs I'm involved with, there are really 2 clubs that I'm involved with heavily here at Tepper. One is obviously the healthcare club, and then the second is the GEC. One cool aspect at Carnegie Mellon at Tepper is a program called 99 Tartans, which is actually a syndicate group here at Tepper, which connects CMU co-founders and founders with CMU alumni, both from a funding and mentorship standpoint. So myself, Mickey Colombo, and Alejandro Virosa, who are second years with me in the program, we actually have the ability to source deals from companies that were founded by CMU alumni and CMU students and help them find funding and mentorship with alumni in the CMU ecosystem. So that's been a club and a group that I've been heavily involved with at campus. So those are the two big items. And then from an affinity club standpoint, I'm also a member of the Asian Business Association. So a total of 3 clubs I'm involved with.
Okay, terrific. I actually might have the whole group respond to at least that second part of the question, because I think it's interesting to hear the different things that you're involved in. But you did a nice job of reminding me that Rob had his board on his slide. And so just maybe, is this a typical board? I mean, is it usually 8 or 9 people on the board? Does that vary from club to club? Maybe Rob, if you want to jump in and just kind of from your perspective, this obviously is your board. Are you familiar with this as a typical
Sure.
structure?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have the biggest board that the GEC has had before, but they kind of did that in response the previous year to our program's year. They did that in response to kind of the pretty excessive outreach for things like venture capital, as Pete was getting at before. There's a lot of interest we see, from MBA students coming in and interested in venture capital, or, we added a new role here, as you'll see, from Onyx Shaw, called, he's the VP of Tech Commercialization. So that's really walking people through and understanding how do you take, a piece of technology, which is pretty neat at a place like Carnegie Mellon, which, if anyone on the call is interested, is actually the birthplace of artificial intelligence, right? So there's a lot of innovation happening here from the technology side. So taking these pieces of tech from the tech transfer office, they look for MBAs in our situation to say, hey, can you take this piece of technology and actually build a company out of it? So we added a role like that just based on the resources that are available to us at Carnegie Mellon. But and to answer your question in terms of typical structure, I think some of the titles that we have might be, similar to other boards. I think we have some unique ones in there. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, everybody, but I think most boards range anywhere from 7 to 9 people on their board in general. Is TCC, Liz? I see making a face there.
We're going to tease that, and we'll find out from Liz in just one second how many folks she has on her board. David, I know that you're involved with multiple clubs, and I wonder if you'd like to talk about that. Feel free to touch on your board if you'd like, given that you're one of the smaller and newer clubs, but I'm totally interested in what you're doing from a club standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so first off, I am involved in 6 different clubs, and I'm a board member for 4 different clubs. And one of those is a non-Tepper CMU-wide club. So it's possible to do that. It's very time consuming. I probably put about, 15 to 20 hours a week into clubs. And to caveat that, the only one I lead is STARS. And whenever you're leading your club, that's your baby, and you make sure like it's good to go and that's everything is lined up and ducks are in a row. But a lot of the other clubs I'm in, I'm putting maybe 1 to 2 hours a week into those clubs. So most of my effort is definitely into the STARS club. So it is very possible to be involved in lots of different clubs, get a lot of different flavor for what you want to do, and you really pick and choose what you do. So I really only heavily get involved with events for the 4 clubs that I'm a leader in at this point. Even though I signed up for 6, the 2 that I'm not a leader for, I don't have enough time to do all their stuff anymore. So you really do pick and choose what you want to do, but there are probably, I don't know, Kelly, at least 30, maybe 40 different clubs in Tepper alone. And we only have a few hundred students. So you can tell if we have, in my club's this one of the smallest at 30 members. So there's a lot of overlap, is my point. And tons of people get involved with lots of clubs, and it's very much the norm. And I think that's the point of this session today, is to tell you guys that this is really an integral part of how we develop professionally here through our MBA, as well as there's a lot of like social clubs, fun clubs, activity clubs out there too. So it's a big part of what we do as a student body. To answer your question though about my board, so my board in STARS last year was 5 members. I went up to 8 members, but I just kept adding people as I kept getting more and more part-time people involved. So for anyone interested in the part-time program, I don't know if we have any of those on the call, but the part-time can certainly be involved in the clubs too. And they bring a lot of great experience. One of my VP for corporate outreach used to work at Virgin Galactic and design parts of Starship 2. So he brings an invaluable industry perspective that pretty much no one else on the board has at this point. Yeah, so it's definitely a plug for the part-time as well.
Kelly,
Excellent.
if I can just
Yeah.
interject really quickly, just and I'll pass it off. David, thanks for bringing that up. As you guys can see on the slides here, Nick Ryan, the vice president of the GEC, he's running our Startup Stories, which is one of our biggest series with the GEC. He is a part-time student as well, and we have a massive part-time involvement with the GEC, and that's something we're looking to continue to grow.
That's excellent. I do know that we have some part-time prospective students on the call as well this evening. So thank you guys for bringing that into the conversation. I think it's a unique aspect of Tepper, the collaboration between our full-time and our part-time students. And so I think that's an important thing to mention. Liz, I wonder, I'm not sure, but I would suspect the consulting club is one of the biggest clubs, one of the largest. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your club. As each of you were talking, kind of the four themes that I heard from you were education, collaboration, mentorship, and career support. And I think I wonder if you could just talk a little bit. I know you did talk about those in your presentation, but I wonder, I think sometimes it might surprise people the amount of collaboration that happens. And I wonder, I know Peter and Rob talked about doing some things maybe collectively, but I wonder, how does that work? And are there ways that clubs work together? Whether it's professional clubs, affinity clubs, or social clubs. It's a pretty broad question, but if you have some thoughts to share, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, more than happy to touch on that. So you are correct. There is a ton of collaboration that happens between the clubs. I can say, like, we as one club, you can't do everything. We need support from each other. And I think that's something that's very unique about Tepper, is just how supportive all of us as a community are. I can say with confidence that we do a lot of co-sponsoring. We actually work closely, I know, with the GFA on helping with some of the Wall Street prep that they run. We try and support that too at times. We also run events to kind of have those industry highlights that we were talking about earlier. So working with OGM, B&T to kind of talk about, operations consulting or tech consulting, trying to find those ways to make sure that we're advocating for the industries, providing those educational opportunities, but also bringing in the experts at the end of the day. Like, these clubs have fantastic experts and knowledge that, like, I can say, at least on the TCC side, that we want to make sure that we're leveraging and working together on. So I think there's a ton of collaboration on the professional side that happens. I can also say too, on the affinity, educational, and social side, there is a lot that happens there as well. I know, especially with firms that are starting to come in, there is a lot of affinity club events where they are actually working closely with the firms to bring the firms in, so that everyone can kind of understand a little bit better of, like, what is it like to be a woman in consulting, or what is it like from a diversity perspective, or from an allied, what does that look like? Trying to bring those perspectives in is vital. And I think is really an important part of career, and as you're deciding that career development and where you want to go. So I tend to see a ton of collaboration that happens from the diversity kind of perspective, educational, professional perspective, and then also, just to kind of reiterate too, from the part-time perspective too, we try and incorporate, be mindful of part-timers and incorporate them into the conversation. Similarly with the other boards, we also have a part-timer on our board, because that is a very important part of our community, and we want to make sure that we're representing them appropriately and efficiently as possible as part of the TCC.
Excellent. Thanks, Liz. And John, last but not least, I have a little bit of a twist to the question for you as well. If you wouldn't mind just talking, if your board structure is a little bit different, feel free to chime in there. One thing that does strike me is that second years spend a lot of time helping first years. And I don't know that that's something that incoming students really understand to the degree that it happens. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that mentorship piece, whether it's formally through your club or just maybe how you may have been interacting with some first year students that that you could speak to that experience as well. And so I'll turn the floor over to you if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. In terms of structure, I think we're pretty much on par with everyone else. If there's a function, there's a VP heading it. But yeah, I think mentorship is so critical to what the GFA does. It's arguably the most important thing aside from our alumni network that we leverage. Especially if you take something like investment banking, which is so time intensive before you even talk to a banker, there's hours upon hours that you've put into it. And ultimately, me and the rest of the second years leverage our experience talking to the bankers and our experience over the summer to prepare first years. So, I personally have 3 mentees right now on top of everything else going on that I'm putting around, 6 to 10 hours in a week with them, making sure that, their behaviorals are straight, their technical prep is up to standard. Especially just because something like banking, it's essentially a one strike system, one bad impression and that bank's gone forever for someone. And so it just takes incredible amount of time. And obviously as second years, that's our priority. We're happy to do it. We're passionate about growing the finance community out of Tepper. So more than happy to do it, but it definitely it's a lot. And it does take a lot of our time up.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I know first years appreciate it, and you all, having lived through it as first years, know how important it is. So Peter, there is a question in the Q&A about mental health initiatives, and I know that that's caught your attention. And I wonder, would you be able to speak to so the work that the Healthcare Club is doing? The person is asking, Ashu is asking, does it have any association with mental health initiatives? And I think more broadly, if you just have some insights, especially, over the past year and a half, we've all kind of been through some things that were new and challenging, maybe just from a personal experience as a student at Tepper at Carnegie Mellon, any insights you have onto mental health initiatives?
Yeah, Ashu, thanks for that question. It's a really good one. I think, like you mentioned, Kelly, with the COVID-19 pandemic, I think there's been a large emphasis on mental health and the importance of mental health. And I know from a healthcare club standpoint, one thing that we've actually partnered with Berkeley Hospice this year is they had a mental health case competition sponsored by Google. And they've invited the healthcare club to participate in that. And that was a good way for our club to not only get exposure to what Google Health is doing in the Bay Area, but also think about some of these mental health challenges that the community is facing today, and thinking about how do we take this complex problem and think of a creative way to solve that solution. So that's one thing from a mental health perspective that we've been working on. And secondly is we've also been thinking about bringing in some companies within this space to come and speak to students. So one company that we've been talking to recently is Headspace. And Headspace is a company that actually all CMU students have free access to Headspace. And that's one thing that I've personally taken advantage of during the pandemic, was trying to do more meditation and getting Zen. Haven't been that successful, but I'm still trying. But that's some ways that the club and me personally, I've been getting involved in terms of tackling mental health.
Yeah, I'll tell you that even staff and faculty have access to that as a perk as well, the Headspace. I've used it myself, and they occasionally will sponsor live sessions. And I don't know if you've had a chance to do those. I was able to jump in on one, and it was really good. Thanks for that insight. So here's a question about pro bono consulting. So I know it's different than the TCC. But Michael is asking if any of you have insight, and Liz, you may have more than others. Could you talk a little bit about the pro bono consulting initiative? He's thinking it's a joint venture between TCC and Net Impact. I personally am not sure exactly how it works, so would love to learn a little bit that you could share.
Yes, and I am more than happy to. I'm also on the board for the pro bono consulting club as well. So it is a collaboration with Net Impact and the TCC. Essentially, the way our goal is to go out to the Pittsburgh community, connect with non-for-profits and small businesses, and really do really do a consulting project for them. So we partner up. We usually take about 10 to 15 applications from local businesses and local non-for-profits that are very diverse. So last year we had One Hood Media, we had a bakery, we had even like a squash not-for-profit organization. They all apply and provide these very unique challenges that they're facing. And then we develop a team of about 5 students per organization to go out and actively solve the problems that they're seeing in the community. It's a really great way, especially if you want to give back to Pittsburgh, kind of give back and interact with the community. I have found it incredibly rewarding. And it's also a great way if you're thinking about consulting or even Net Impact, a way for you to just start flexing the skills that you're learning in the classroom or even throughout kind of the curriculum that you're getting through the clubs at Tepper. I have found it, like I said, I found it incredibly rewarding. I'm very excited because I know we've got a lot of participation from local community already this year. And I know like the students are very excited to get started on some of these projects.
Excellent. I know I've met people in the community, and that's something when they find out that I work at the business school, that's something that I've been asked about a couple of times. So Raisa is asking a question directed to Rob, and Rob, I'm wondering if you could answer this. Does the GEC provide technical guidance on organizational management and internship opportunities in the USA public sector organizations?
Yeah, I saw that question, Kelly. I mean, I don't know if I can speak directly to that. I know I can probably offer 2 options. One, we have our Operations and General Management Club, OGM, that does a great job of getting people involved in this space, most likely with government opportunities as well in the public sector. But, you know, as just kind of an example of the opportunities that do exist to get involved in kind of an operations role within that space, the slide is still up there, so I can point to Andy Golak, who's our VP of Venture Capital. So he joined ARPA-E, which is an initiative spun out of, I believe it was the Department of Energy. And basically he got to operate in a funding role, working within a venture capital arm of the government that specifically focuses on, you know, building operations for energy focused startups. And so, you know, though those paths aren't necessarily the most typical, and GEC might not be your first stop to getting involved with an operational role or a general management role, you know, again, that just kind of speaks to, I think, the amount of experience that students at Tepper do have, and how it kind of can span multiple different areas. And, you know, at the GEC, we do kind of, you know, we are kind of like a catch for a lot of different interests. So, you know, I don't know if I'm able to answer that as pointed as maybe you wanted it to, but, you know, in general, I think if you do a little bit of digging or you try and speak with folks like Andy, they can probably answer a lot of those questions for you.
Thanks so much for that, Rob. I have another question, or a couple more questions here. I'll roll into one about VC. So, John, do you know, does the university or the business school have a VC fund or business incubation resources that our students participate in managing? Is that something that we have at Tepper?
Truthfully, I'm not sure. We don't do all that much with VC in general. We've partnered with the GEC, held a great VC event together. I think maybe Peter with 99 Tartans or Rob may be able to field that one though.
Okay, Peter, would you like to give that a shot? And then we'll go to you, Rob.
Yeah, definitely. So there's, I think, two main ways that an MBA could potentially get involved with in terms of VC opportunities. One is more what's happening at Tepper in the local VC community. So the one thing I'm involved with is 99 Tartans, and I gave a little snippet of what we do there and how MBA students can get involved. But there are other opportunities on campus through avenues like Blue Tree Capital, which is a local angel investing firm where you can volunteer as a due diligence analyst and really help evaluate startups that are coming into the pipeline. And then I know that last year there was an alumni named Melissa Bizzari who had the opportunity to actually do an internship opportunity with the CMU endowment. So the CMU endowment is an actual fund that's collected through the school that invests in opportunities to raise capital for companies. So that's another opportunity to get involved with venture capital here in the ecosystem. I'll pass it over to Rob, and I'm sure he has got a ton of more information as well.
No, Peter, that's great, and you're spot on. I think just to kind of even illuminate a little bit more about what Peter's talking about, Tepper has an incredible network of venture capitalists that are connected to it, whether that's here locally in Pittsburgh or spanning across maybe the country, if not the world. So one of the initiatives we've done at the GEC this last year, Peter was involved with it with 99 Tartans, is we kind of did a pseudo just connector series. Just to get students connected to the venture capital firms that exist. So we called it kind of a student in residence career fair, where basically we brought in about 15 different venture capital firms, whether that's family offices or Series A funds, and we were able to connect them to the students. They had a networking opportunity, and then they took some of their conversations offline as to how could I get involved with maybe a venture capital firm for an internship, or how could I even just help out in things like deal flow and understanding what the ecosystem looks like. Additionally, we're going to be offering, a Wall Street Preps venture capital workshop this year. So that's going to be open to all Tepper students, not just GEC members, to be able to come in and do kind of a one-day intensive on the basics of venture capital, which will be really exciting. And then I guess from some personal experience, I recently was just accepted as a fellow for a venture capital firm called Quiet Capital. So they are actually founded by a Tepper grad, along with a couple other gentlemen, successful entrepreneurs. And so basically, getting to work with them, be on the inside of deal flow opportunities, what's happening from like an internal incubation arm with them. And, it's super exciting. I think, not to kind of bolster the Tepper community a little bit, but I think oftentimes people look to credibility with VC firms as well. And the companies that Peter's looking at with 99 Tartans are going out and they're raising tens of millions of dollars. The venture firm that I'm working with now has invested in companies at the seed stage, the earliest stage, in companies like Robinhood, Reddit, Airbnb, Slack, just to name a few. So we really do have access to a really incredible network of venture capitalists and kind of can get you in the door with some of those premier firms.
Great, thank you so much. John, I'm going to come back your way and try to actually give you a question that might, this is a broader question. So many of you can answer, but I'll start with you. So, Eliana is asking about, we're talking a lot about the club activities and the time you're spending and what you're learning in clubs. And she's wondering what proportion of the skills that you've learned at Tepper have been from clubs versus classes and internships, and kind of what are some examples? Because honestly, to this point, it seems like maybe you came here to actually be in clubs when the reality is you probably also go to class during the week as well. So would you mind to speak just to kind of how your classwork and the internship and the club activities, how they're complementary or how they build off of one another?
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately, with how quick the banking timeline is, you hit the ground running in September. You don't actually take Finance 2 until Mini 2, and so a lot of the things, or excuse me, Finance 1 until Mini 2, and so a lot of the things you learn in Finance 1, you've sort of already learned because you've gone through the GFA's programming. I think a lot of value add comes, once you take like something like Finance 2, where you can then explore the different financial classes. You can look at like our PE VC class was a really good class for me to take, just understanding valuing. And then I ultimately worked a couple deals over the summer with a PE firm. And so I was able to apply that to my internship. And so I think, ultimately the electives that you can explore in that second semester, you really get to, I guess, guide your path and figure out what you're going to need in your future. And you can really select from there. There's obviously a robust course option here. So yeah, you can pretty much anything you're interested in, you can definitely pick up as a course, that's for sure.
Okay, terrific. David, do you have some thoughts you might be able to add to this as well?
Yeah, for sure. So the clubs are great if you know where you want to go. But the overall classes and the education is going to give you a flavor of everything. So you're going to be learning operations, you're going to be learning marketing, you're going to be learning strategy, finance, so on and so forth. And it's going to give you the round experience through those core classes to kind of get a better feel for what flavor makes the most sense for you. And a lot of people already know what they're going to do. But one of the things that I think is really cool with this program is our clubs allow you to get really deep into one thing, but your overall education makes you very broad as well. And that allows you to have that T, which allows you to become a really great innovator at the end of the day, to add on to that. And in my case, one of the coolest things for me, I had no idea doing this. My internship was with an industrial company, Emerson, this summer. But I actually worked on tech data analytics the whole summer. I built Oracle dashboards and did a bunch of coding. And I knew nothing about coding prior to my MBA. But from one elective that I just happened to take and didn't pay nearly enough attention in, that was my entire summer, was that one class. So had I not taken that class, I would have been lost in the sauce. But instead, I now have a great full-time job because of it.
So I love that example, and I wonder, and again, this might be a little off topic from clubs, but certainly since these are professional clubs, I wonder if you all could speak to, from an internship experience, how did you feel you were prepared from an academic standpoint, from the extracurricular opportunities you've had working in your clubs? How did you feel you were prepared as you were sitting at your internships along other MBA interns from other schools? Not necessarily to speak to a specific school, but how did you feel in terms of your preparation? Liz, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I had a very interesting experience because going into consulting, you've got a large class of other MBA candidates interning with you. And then you're kind of put on these separate projects. And I will say, there were two, if not three classes that were instrumental that really kind of set me apart actually throughout my summer internship. The first was modern data management. Learning SQL and Tableau actually helped me become what is known as at a consulting firm, a subject matter expert for my project team, which is something very rare that most associates or interns do not get to do. So that was something that actually set me apart throughout my summer, was being able to immediately be like, oh yes, I know what it's like to set up a database. I know what it's like to set up these dashboards. Being able to set that apart was incredibly vital. The other things too was managing networks, which I believe as a core course that you all will take in Mini for, and then managing power and influence with Professor Crackhart. Those two classes were actually really important for me to actually understand what change management framework, how to manage those networks, which became the core project that I was working on for the summer. And most of my other colleagues around me had not actually been exposed to that concept yet. So where I was already running almost on day one on my projects, other kind of people were starting to have to catch up and kind of learn what those concepts were. So that's something that I think Tepper was vital and very helpful for me.
Perfect, thank you. Peter, do you have anything to add based on your experience?
No, I think Liz covered it and did a really good job answering. I think the one thing I would add was it was the Tepper alumni at Genentech that really helped me be successful. I think it was week 3 in the internship. I was on a one-on-one call with Ed Harrington, who was the CFO at Genentech. So having that Tepper alumni network of about 15 people that I could lean on through the summer experience just to say, hey, I'm working on this problem, or hey, I need to talk to this person in this organization. Can you tell me a little bit more about that person and what makes them work? Just those like little things about navigating a large company like Genentech and tapping into the Tepper network was, I think, what set me apart in my internship.
That's great. And Bree is actually asking a question about how involved is the alumni with regard to the job search, support, and connections. That takes it a step further, really. Your experience kind of illustrates how during the internship, how that alumni network helped support you. I wonder if any of you would be able to speak to another example where you've leveraged the alumni in a capacity related to your post-MBA careers or your internship. Rob, you're nodding, and I suspect that there's a lot of networking that happens in your world. I wonder if you have some info you could share.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep this rather short in the sense that like alumni, networking was kind of everything for my internship pursuit, and most likely what I'm going to be pursuing after the MBA program. Whether it's for me personally, the plethora of startups that have come out of the Tepper ecosystem and just getting in touch with them through the Sports Center, through the Tepper alumni network, and just, starting to pick their brain about opportunities, because oftentimes in the entrepreneurial world, internships don't pop up as organically as they do for other industries, and you kind of have to dig your way at creating one. And without the alumni network, oftentimes I wouldn't be able to create those positions. And then additionally, just to kind of add to what Peter was saying, once I did get into my role I was in a small brand strategy firm this summer that specifically works with startups. Going about that, that experience of interviewing folks and getting more, customer feedback, getting involved with the Tepper alumni at all of these other companies to leverage that was pivotal in my success with the internship and, receiving a return offer from those folks. So the alumni network is absolutely invaluable. If I could give any piece of advice to anyone on the call, it's that, no matter where you land, tap into, and hopefully it's Tepper, tap into that alumni network, because it honestly will open doors you truly didn't think existed before.
Excellent, thanks. John, do you have some insights that you would like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and Rob hit it really well. The alumni network is pretty much everything, especially in finance and something like banking. You really can't get a foot in the door without someone vouching for you. And that's exactly what our alumni network does. From a personal experience, I picked Wells Fargo and the TMT group because an alumni there actually mentored me before I even had my interview. He was putting hours on hours in, just making sure I was ready, making sure I was going to be successful, which doesn't seem like all that much, like 2 or 3 hours a week, but that's essentially a 1 a.m. versus a 3 a.m. bedtime for him. So I would say it's everything. The alumni network is incredible here.
Excellent, thank you. David, there's a candidate or a prospective student who's asking a question, who's really fascinated with stars, and wants to ask if the club works in close collaboration with the tech club, and how difficult would it be to transition from a banking sector program management role, or is that something too ambitious? And I think you're putting on your career mentoring hat here. But if you'd like to take that question, that would be great.
Well, the second part of that is very easy. I also have no background in space at all, and it is very doable. Really, to echo on the last question, the alumni network is everything. So being able to come to a place that already has a network in an industry this kind of like niche at this point is exceptional. And that has led to me being able to get some really great connections and great perspective on some of the companies that are very much on the startup side. So even though these are famous companies, like Blue Origin only has 4,000 employees, so they're pretty small at this point compared to a lot of the other companies people are recruiting into. Now, for collaboration, so the space industry is very hardware heavy at this point and very capital intensive. So the banking background and whatnot is actually very applicable there, because with all the capital being involved in that, they definitely do a lot of corporate finance in those companies, and that's where they look to hire MBAs. Now, the tech club here is very product management focused, and most of these companies, their product managers are coming from the engineering background side. So MBAs aren't a very good entry point into product management in space companies at this point. So we have not done a lot of collaborations with the tech, the BNT club here at Tepper because of that.
Terrific, thanks. I think that probably doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but I think the clubs are shaped from year to year, and it's interesting to understand kind of what that looks like this year.
Yeah, and to add on that, once people are up in space more regularly, there will definitely be a need for products up there. And that's the point, that they will need product managers to gear stuff for space. So it's coming. It's just a question of when. And the point of this club is to gear people to be ready for that point.
Right. And Captain Kirk is actually going to space soon.
He sure is.
Have...
next week.
Yeah.
Next week on
William Shatner.
Tuesday. Yeah, William Shatner's going up.
I love it.
Man to space.
I love it. So another question, I'd like to maybe switch gears just a little bit. So Peter, I'm thinking about last year, you worked with the admissions team I think at that point you were on the junior board for Health Club, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's a question here about how do you become a board member or a president of a club? That made me think of you, and I wonder if you could just talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think for all of us on the call here today, that's something that we wanted to do coming to Tepper, thinking about leading our peers and leading a club for Tepper. But to answer the question, there's a couple of ways you go about doing that. One is first find a club that really resonates with you in terms of the industry that you find yourself working in. And once you identify that, the first step as a first year is to apply to be a junior board member. And that's the part of your time at Tepper in your first year where you start to understand what it takes to lead a club. You understand the logistics, what happens behind the scenes, get a feel about what it's like to lead a club. And then in your second year, or actually before your second year, around mini 4 or mini 3 is when there will be elections where you will actually present to your club members and give an opportunity and say why you would like to be president of your club. And sort of for the healthcare club was a voting process. So the board members last year who just graduated voted, along with the full-time board members that opted not to be president. And it was kind of a voting system based on how you see the club moving forward, the vision that you have. And it was kind of a democratic process in terms of electing the next president.
Thank you very much. I know that it's always interesting to see students getting involved early in clubs. And I think you have the opportunity, at least from my vantage point, the opportunity to take on leadership roles, even as a first year, although it might not be the president, you still have the opportunity to get involved there. I think that's really exciting. So I have another question here. Someone is asking about, at what stage of your life did you make the decision to stop work and go for a full-time MBA? I'm suspecting that for each person it could be a little bit different, and just if I could have a couple of you speak to that in terms of what was your thought process, what made you understand that the timing was right, And I wonder, Rob, if you could be the first one to give a shot at that question.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm assuming there's a lot of similarities probably in all of our answers to that question, but also a lot of differences just based on, individual circumstances, time in life, other people that have a big impact on your life, all of that sort of stuff. For me on a personal level, it came down to just asking a really kind of difficult question to myself, which was just, why do you need an MBA? Because as everyone I think on this call knows, it can be a pretty big financial, investment or risk in some people's eyes if things don't pan out the way you want it to. So when deciding to go get an MBA, I really had to take account of where I was at in my career, the skills that I had, and understanding the skills that I was absolutely going to need in order to progress for me specifically in the startup environment. If I ever wanted to raise a successful funding round from venture capital firms and maybe found a successful business, there were a lot of tools that I was going to need that an MBA could really provide. I definitely don't want to hide from the fact that opening up an incredible opportunity with a network is a big draw for an MBA. That's a huge part of the MBA experience so far. So I saw that as, a huge benefit, but, ultimately I think I had to be honest with myself about what my career aspirations were. The role I was playing at the company, I was at, was it going to be able to take me there? Was my, career on the path to put me in the position that I wanted to be in 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road? So it's one of the hardest things you can do, kind of taking stock of where you're at now and the tools that you have now, and are they going to be enough to get you where you want to be 15, 20, even 30 years down the road? It's a hard question to answer, but if you can really be honest with yourself there, I think the MBA journey and the decision to get an MBA becomes a lot easier, and you're a lot more confident in your choice.
Excellent, thank you. David, do you have some information that you could add?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually applied and was accepted as a part-time student, and I switched the summer before classes started to full-time. And I wanted to explain that thought process a little bit. So I had a great career and a great job at Walmart as a supply chain manager there, and things were progressing in a way that, like, I didn't need an MBA potentially, but at the same time, I also wanted to gain more perspective on things. I didn't have a very broad background, very focused background, and I'd never taken any classes in finance, had no experience in marketing, and really wanted to get to a level where I could be a strategic decision maker and have a big impact on a company. And that's where I really saw myself going. And sure, I could have been promoted up where I was at and been happy there to a certain extent. But at the same time, I always would have been wondering, what if? So I decided to switch to full-time from the part-time program, largely to be able to gain the value that the network has to its fullest. Being a part-time student is still an excellent option, and you still get a lot of the benefits, but you still have a full-time job at the end of the day. So it's very demanding and stressful, and I thought I'd be at a great point in my life to be able to shift gears and focus on that, and really buckle down and gain the most experience I can from the MBA. And looking now backwards, like, I couldn't have made a better choice at this point. I've had so many great opportunities, and so many, the last couple weeks when I've been hemming and hawing over all these different great paths that I could choose from, had you told me 2 years ago this is where I'd be at, where I have all these great different choices that I could go with, and none of them are bad, I think that's what an MBA gives you, is just the potential to work in the space company, the potential to be a strategic leader in a Fortune 500 company, or the potential to go start up your own company. That's something I didn't even think about coming here. And we have one of the best entrepreneurship programs in the country. So plug for that too. Yeah, for Rob and his team as well.
I'm going to scoot back to the screen with your photos on it, and we'll go in order. So Liz, we'll start with you. And I wonder if you could just remember what it's like to be in the place where our guests are. So they're, it's early October, they're researching schools. One deadline, timing has just passed. The options are varied for considering MBA programs. And I wonder, what advice would you give to the candidates as they're sitting there, knowing what you know now, fast forwarding a year and almost a half later?
Yeah, I remember that time very fondly. It was very stressful, but it was a very, very exciting time. For me, I think if I had to give a piece of advice, it's gonna be challenge yourself. So one of the things when I was applying, like I will be 100% honest, Tepper was actually like my dream school. I really wanted to come to Tepper because of the analytics focus. And because a number of the other positive connections I'd had with the students and the alumni. And so for me, I was very much in I want to challenge myself to achieve something, to get the goal, to get the career I want. And I would say that to you, don't be afraid to push yourself, because now is the time that you should take that leap, take that jump. This is the best time for you to make those challenges right now.
Thank you. John, would you like to share some thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest piece of advice I could give you for where you are right now is just to explore. Explore your options, explore the communities that you're going to be joining. Make sure it's like a good cultural fit wherever you go. I would focus less on like the job statistics and the output to this company or that company. It's a very unique, once in a lifetime 2-year experience, and make sure you're going to enjoy it. I think that's most important. So I would say just explore and make sure everything's the right fit.
Excellent. Peter, you're up.
Yeah, John stole my thunder there. My two things in terms of recommendations: one is culture. Really understand the culture of the school that you're applying to. I was really lucky during my search process to have two friends, really good friends, that went to Tepper and who really showed me around and allowed me to meet current students that gave me an idea of how collaborative the school was. So I would say the culture is a big thing. And second is go in with an open mind. I think a lot of times prospective students have this really tunnel vision mindset in terms of what they want to do with their career. And that's great. But like David had mentioned, like Liz and John and Robin mentioned, there's so many opportunities that come your way when you come to business school. So just go in with that open mind and really explore different opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you. Rob, would love to hear from you.
Hard to go forth after all this good advice, David. I'm sorry you might have the opportunity to really mic drop here, but I want to hark back to Liz a little bit on the challenge yourself piece. I think that is, truly to me, one of the most important aspects. You're making this investment in yourself, right? If you've decided you're going to get an MBA, you're applying to school, try and get out of that indecisive space where it's, I guess I should put a little bit more time in, or I could just go, hang out over here and do whatever. I mean, challenge yourself now. In the grand scheme of things, it's a short time commitment. I think all of us in this call can probably barely believe we're almost through the mini one of our second year. It goes fast. And so you're going to be busier than you've ever been, but push, and then push some more. I think we all find the busier we get, the better results we start to produce. So you have the capability to do it. It's going to be really difficult, but the benefits that you reap after you put that time in are pretty boundless. So just keep pushing.
Excellent. And David, it's all yours to bring us home, my friend.
Sure. So luckily none of them stole it from me. For me, where I was when you guys were applying and everything, what made me decide on Tepper was my visit. So I can't stress how awesome it is if you can actually come and visit the school. Check it out. make sure that culture is a fit. If you can't get here, do everything you can to explore our culture and understand who we are and what we do. Because for me, just coming on campus and seeing our awesome facility and seeing all the other students working in here and participating with a few students, going out to dinner with a few of the other veterans that were current MBAs and picking their brain for a night was so invaluable for me. And I didn't get that at a lot of the other schools I was applying to. And that's really what made my decision at that point. So come check us out.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. And I just want to say to the attendees, thank you so much for coming this evening to learn a little bit more about the Tepper School. I hope you got a good view of the important role that our professional clubs play, and our student leaders really make that happen. I want to just encourage you, if you have questions beyond this evening, maybe something that you didn't get an answer to, feel free to reach out to the admissions team, mba-admissions@andrew.cmu.edu. And I'll say it one more time, mba-admissions@andrew.cmu.edu is the email address for you to drop a question. We will get back to you. You can also set up some time to talk to an admission officer, and we can further connect you with our students as well. Panelists, I'd love to say thank you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for the time that you spent and the experience that you've shared. It's been wonderful spending this evening with you. With that, I will wish everyone a good night, and thanks again for coming, and we hope to see you at our next Tepper Talks.